Hi there, folks. Welcome to the Sacramento Sunrise Candidate Forum for 2020. We're going to get started in a couple minutes. Our first interview is at 2:10, but I thought I would make some introductions here and explain some of the format. So first off, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge that we are on the territory of the Nisnan people, as well as potentially unrecognized tribes. The Sacramento area is also home to Miwok, Maidu, and Patwin people, and we recognize that tribes including the Winnemem Witu pass through this land in their run for salmon. We honor the people and elders here today, the ancestors, and the people who died in genocides past and present. We honor their ongoing resistance to genocide and colonization. So let's take a moment for that. Now I'd like to talk about the format of this. So we have a total of, I believe, 6 interviews here. Nope, I'm wrong, 5 interviews with a couple different candidates. Our first will be Fatima Malik, who's running for SMUD District Ward 5. That'll be from 2:10 to 2:25. Then we have Mai Vang, who is running for Sacramento City Council District 8. And that's from 2:25 to 2:40. Then Tamika L'Ecluse, and I apologize if I butchered that name. I'll definitely ask when we get you in here, for American River Flood Control District, and that is from 2:40 to 2:55. Rob Kerth, who is also running for SMUD Board District or SMUD Ward 5, and is the current incumbent there. That's 2:55 to 3:10. And then we have Gregg Fishman, who's running for Sacramento County Board of Supervisors, District 3, from 3:10 to 3:25. We have a little bit of extra space in case some folks run long, but we're going to try and keep it concise. Each candidate will have 3 to 4 minutes to do their intro, followed by questions, which I have in a document that thankfully the folks at Sunrise have added a bunch of questions to. So we'll try and get through as many of those as we can. And then after this, we're going to switch over to a discussion that the candidates won't be allowed to attend because it's an internal discussion for Sunrise, so we can kind of figure out who we are endorsing. So let's see where we are. I believe that we have Fatima in the waiting room. Is that correct? In the meeting now. Yes. Hello,
Hi.
Fatima. How's it going?
Hi. Good. How are you? Good afternoon.
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thank you. And yeah, good afternoon to you as well. So yeah, like I said, we're gonna have 3 to 4 minutes for you to do an intro. Then you'll get to answer some questions until about 2:25, and then we're going to actually ask you to leave the meeting so that we can kind of keep the candidates separate. Sound good?
Sounds wonderful. Thank you.
Cool. So I'll give the floor to you. Give you a couple minutes to introduce yourself and why you're running.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. So my name is Fatima Malik, and I identify as a South Asian woman of color. And my family moved to Sacramento. My mother is a single parent. She raised 5 children on her own. I'm the 5th of 6 children. And, you know, growing up in Sacramento, I live in Del Paso Heights, have lived here for a long time. I'm an alumni of Grant High School, UC Davis, San Jose State. I've studied agriculture, and I'm a public health professional. Most recently, I'm working at the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, serving as a grant analyst on the Community and Local Equity Grants Unit. And the reason that I am running for the SMUD Board is for a number of reasons, but the top 3 reasons is because I'm concerned about the multiple crises that we are in now, namely the climate change induced heat wave that we've been experiencing and the resulting fires. Not only that, but you know, there is a lot of changes in the way in which we are living our lives that are contingent upon the way in which our energy is produced and consumed. In addition to that, there is a generation that is going to be lost if we do not solve the digital divide as it relates to school being started and children not having access to broadband internet. And that is an opportunity that SMUD can provide as a local utility company. And thirdly, we need to wean ourselves off of our dependency on fossil fuel. And so I want to make sure that we achieve 100% clean and renewable energy as soon as possible, because we know that we are running out of time and it is very crucial. There's a couple other reasons why I find that SMUD needs new leadership. The first is that the current incumbent has been in this seat for 12 years. And so that's 12 years that this incumbent had to address a lot of these issues that were not addressed. And the fact that because of COVID-19, we are spending more time at home than ever before. And the current rate structure does not address equity as it relates to the time of day rates. Okay. And the fact that we are home more than ever, the way in which we use energy, how we go to school, how we work has changed dramatically. And as a result, we need to be able to find better solutions that are more practical beyond energy saving tips that are the current options on the table. SMUD customers also need to have more options and choices as it relates to their desire to be able to produce their own energy. So I want to talk a little bit about my personal experience. Living in Del Paso Heights, unfortunately, the housing stock is comprised of mostly renters, and of those that are renting, so I rented a home for 10 years, and it was very old, and it was very energy inefficient. And as a result, my SMUD and PG&E bills were hundreds of dollars. And that really affected my ability to pay for anything else because of my limited disposable income. Now, fast forward 2016, I had the opportunity to be able to become a first-time home buyer, and I was able to buy a home in Del Paso Heights and take advantage of SMUD's smart home, one of the first kind of SMUD solar smart homes. And I was able to become a solar customer of SMUD. And since then, my life has changed dramatically, right? My SMUD bill has not been more than $100 a month. And because of my commitment to the environment, which has been a longstanding commitment because I have been involved in agriculture and advocating for policies to change around the production of food. Similarly, now I want to be able to advocate for changing the policies around the production of our energy. And I was able to, begin to utilize a zero emissions vehicle 2 years ago. I got an electric car. 2-minute warning, got it. Okay, so in regards to the commitment to the environment, I want to talk about the need to stop burning fossil fuels. That is the biggest need right now that we have from SMUD. The second biggest need is customers need to be able to have more options and choices as it relates to solar energy. And the other thing that I want to talk about is there are a lot of SMUD customers right now. There are about 50,000 SMUD customers, maybe more, whose accounts are in arrears. And I'm very concerned about this ongoing, just perpetuation of poverty. If we are to really address environmental justice, and if we are really to achieve equity in disadvantaged communities, then we must move beyond the energy assistance programs, because those are only band-aids to the bigger issue at hand. As we look at what's ahead of us, we have a number of crises to resolve. Not only COVID-19 and poverty and climate change, but we also need to make our communities more energy resilient. And we need to have better plans in place that are going to focus on what will our neighborhoods look like in the next 5 to 10 years, because we cannot continue to rely on this highly expensive, centralized, aging grid and infrastructure. And so for those reasons, I am here before you to invite you to support me in my efforts to help bring the necessary change in leadership, to bring effective, sound policies to address the 21st century challenges ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatima. I appreciate your intro. You got in that 2-minute window I gave you, so excellent job there. I'm going to go ahead and start asking some questions. If folks have additional questions and they have access to the Sunrise document, please feel free to put them in there. You can also put some questions in the chat, and we'll see if we can get to those as well.
Sure.
So the first question that we have for you is, what will you do if your constituents want, what they want is different than what industry groups like the Solar Rights Alliance advises you they want?
Well, you know, I think that oftentimes there are competing interests. And what's more important is that all voices are heard and acknowledged. And there needs to be an opportunity to reach a consensus. And sometimes if consensuses cannot be reached, then there is an opportunity for, in my background in community building, we use the gradients of agreements. And the gradients of agreement rely on the need for all parties and stakeholders involved to be able to communicate and reach an agreement as to what are the non-negotiables and what are some things that we're willing to trade off. And so if there are things that, let's say, certain interest groups want, but other groups do not want, you know, there is going to be a need for deliberation to come to an agreement that everyone agrees on. And if we cannot reach a consensus, then we need to reach a gradient of agreement as to, well, what am I willing to live with versus what is a non-negotiable? And so that would be, my role would be to facilitate those conversations and to work with the staff and with the parties involved, all stakeholders, to ensure that all voices are heard and that we address and find solutions that meet everyone's needs.
Great, thank you. Next question is, how do you plan to work with other board members, especially to get those agreements, especially if you beat the incumbent, who is someone they've potentially known for quite a while? Yeah,
that's a really good question. So, you know, I think that is the beauty of being on a board, is that you have the opportunity to educate your colleagues and your peers. And so I have served on a nonprofit board for 15 years. I've served on the City of Sacramento's Parks and Recreation Commission for 7 years. And during those times, there's been many difficult decisions and conversations to be had. So one thing that I will do working with my colleagues as a board member is to really understand where they're coming from, what their concerns are, what their values are, and to ensure that we all have an opportunity to be heard and to work collegially to find out, well, what's the best decision for the community and for the customers, as well as for the organization. And sometimes we have to be able to have trade-offs and conversations around, well, what do we value, right? And on many occasions, there is this need to address equity. And I think that if we can begin to have conversations around, well, what is important and what do we value? And I know that SMUD as an organization values their leadership in environmental stewardship. And I think if we focus on those values, we can continue to have conversations that are important and difficult as it relates to what do we do about the challenges ahead of us, as well as some of the very difficult financial and social and equitable decisions that need to be made to make sure that especially those communities that are left most behind are heard and included in this process. As it relates to working with my colleagues, I have a very strong track record of being a collaborative partner, and I enjoy working with different people with different backgrounds and valuing diverse perspectives, and I will continue to bring that to this space.
Great. And just a reminder that we are going to cut you off at 2:25. Okay. So we got about 6 more minutes, so I'll throw some more questions at you. Speaking of the shared values of SMUD, they recently passed a climate emergency declaration. What do you think that you can push SMUD to do to make sure that declaration is fulfilled?
I'm sorry, what can I do to what? What was the end of your question?
What can you do as part of the board to make sure that that climate emergency declaration is fulfilled, the goals of it?
Oh, I'm sorry. The goals of, I'm not understanding your question. Can you repeat that one
Sorry
more
about
time?
Yeah, so the climate emergency declaration that SMUD just passed a couple weeks ago,
Yes,
it has some pretty strong goals to get SMUD to carbon neutral by 2030.
right.
Not just carbon neutral, I forget the exact term for it, but
Hmm.
what are you going to do as part of the SMUD board to make sure that that gets fulfilled?
Yeah, so, I think at the end of the day, we need to stop climate change. And I'm not sure if carbon neutral is going to get us there. And I'm not sure if we have 10 years. And so, one of the things that I would strongly push for is that this climate change emergency declaration have more teeth as a policy. And in order to do that, we need to have clear plans about how and when are we going to close these gas powered power plants. And we need to do it before 10 years. So we know that 3 of the 5 power plants are in disadvantaged communities, still polluting the airways and causing respiratory and other challenges such as asthma. And we know that COVID-19 affects the respiratory health. And so that would be the biggest challenge for me is as I look at this declaration is having clear goals as to let's close at least 3 of the 5 and we don't have 10 years, so let's close them in the next 5 years. And in order to do that, then we need to have an aggressive plan for how do we actually now produce that energy in a more clean and renewable way that also focuses on equity.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This might be the last question, but hopefully we'll get a couple more in. There have been some concerns expressed about your experience, not that your experience is bad, but that you might not have the experience related to the energy industry needed for this position. What do you say to those concerns?
I think that is a interesting concern because, my experience in agriculture and public health has given me the skills to be able to research and learn quickly. And so for me, as a researcher, I'm able to apply those skills and learn what is needed. And first of all, as a SMUD customer, I think, one, I would bring a representation that is necessary. And I have a wide range of lived and life experiences that will also contribute to the richness of the conversations. And in terms of the experience, that is something that I can gain and I can learn about the energy sector, which is something that is doable because of the skill sets that I bring.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
SMUD just released a solar study. I believe that it was last week. Yeah. What is your opinion on that solar study, and have you dived into it to look at the raw numbers?
Yeah, so I do have a perspective on it. I think that similar to the tobacco industry and similar to a lot of the folks developing studies around climate change, oftentimes, depending on who's commissioning those studies, it can lead to bias. And so one of my biggest concerns about this study is even the title and how it's titled is the value of solar and solar storage. And unfortunately, there is a certain degree of bias in this report as it relates to validating all of the arguments that SMUD has to date against solar being something that is decentralized and is a choice and an option for its customers.
Great. Well, I think I'll stop the questions there, and I'll give you 30 seconds to kind of close out with a closing statement.
Sure, absolutely. So I just want to say that, there is a need to create change that will focus on what is ahead of us. And I think that in the spirit of the Green New Deal, I care about climate change. I care about serving disadvantaged communities. I come from a disadvantaged background. And so I just really look forward to being a part of this movement with you all. And I'm really excited for the opportunity to be here today. And I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you as well, Fatima. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
And now we're going to kick you out of this meeting.
All right. Take care. Have a good one. Bye.
Well, it appears that we had Mai Vang for a moment, and then she's disappeared. So let's put this on hold for a moment while we try and track down our next candidate. Again, this will be Mai Vang running for Sacramento City Council District 8. Words. Do we have her yet? She's in. Okay.
Hi, can you guys hear me? My
We
Wi-Fi
can.
is cutting in and out. I think I had logged in earlier. Just wanted to make sure you can hear me. Can you hear me?
We can indeed hear you.
Okay, awesome. I
Cool.
was thinking about turning on my camera. Let me just say, turn on my camera really quick, only because I'm gonna turn it off because I don't want it to, because I figured if I turn off my camera, the Wi-Fi, you can be able to hear me. But let me just turn on my camera on really quick and say hi to everyone. It's just, I'm incredibly grateful just to be here today, and really hope to earn your support. And just, just really grateful that, I even get the opportunity to share my story and earn the support and endorsement of Sunrise Sacramento. So with that said, I'll go ahead and turn off my camera just in case, so that you can hear me. So.
Great, and thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
So just to outline the format here, we're going to give you a couple minutes to intro yourself and why you're running for this seat and why you want us to vote for you. And then we're going to have a bunch of questions that we've written down ahead of time, as well as potential questions from the chat. So now I'll give you a couple minutes. Because we're already a couple minutes in, we'll give you about 2 minutes to give yourself an intro.
Okay, awesome. Thanks. So thank you so much again. First, again, I just really want to thank each and every one of you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today and to be in space with Sunrise Sacramento. I also just want to say, I hope all of you are staying safe and healthy, washing your hands, wearing a mask if y'all are going out, and practicing physical distancing. Second, before I actually, share a little bit of myself, I also want to just say thank you to all of you and all the young folks who are part of Sunrise Sacramento. Because I think it's really important to acknowledge just your tireless efforts and your advocacy work to stop climate change. I think many of y'all are climate activists, and you are actually the one leading all the work here locally to ensure that we create the type of world that is better for our families and our communities, a world where we could stop climate change. And a big part of that, I know, of the movement is really to make sure that we can transform our region and even the world through a different type of economy that's more green, right? And I also want to acknowledge the fact, that as a woman of color, I think oftentimes, just growing up, when we talk about climate change, folks think it's a white issue. And I see it very interconnected, because I know that the fight against climate change exists along all sorts of fights, from, addressing white supremacy and colonialism, because these are the structures that actually gives us the outcome that we have today here in Sacramento. And so I just want to say that. So my name is Mai Vang. I am a daughter of Hmong refugees, incredibly proud to be a Sacramento native. I am the oldest of 16 kids in my family. So as you know, at a young age, I learned the importance of stepping up to take care of your family and your community. I was the first in my family to go to college, and then when I returned home, I became really actively involved. And a big part of that is, when I went away to college, the main reason actually why I went away to college was because I actually wanted to leave Sacramento, growing up in poverty, and I felt like it was my one way, a one-way ticket. But when I went to college, and this is the reason why I believe in education, is that I really learned about basically why my family was displaced. I truly believe in the power of knowledge. When I came back to Sacramento, I realized you can have a college degree, but if your community is still struggling, you are, what good is a college degree? And so I started organizing South Sacramento with HIP. And look, basically, I'm running for Sacramento City Council because I believe, it is time to have bold and courageous leaders at City Hall to fight for our families. As many of you know, we are in the middle of a global pandemic. Many of our families are struggling with the recent heat wave and fire. I think we're reminded that the climate crisis is also a social justice issue, because we know that COVID, climate change, the pain and the struggle is not equally shared among different communities, but we know that it's communities of colors, low-income communities that's bearing the brunt of the devastating effects of COVID, and also climate change. And I'm running to make sure that, you know, we keep that the core center of addressing the needs for families, our neighborhoods. And I believe that I'm the candidate. You know, given we are in campaign, right? I am a candidate, but you know, after the primary over the past.
I'm going to cut you off as the facilitator. It's my job to.
No worries, Corinne. No worries at all. Yeah, go ahead.
Cool. And the only reason I cut you off is because we have a lot of questions that we want to ask you, and we want to give you the time to do that as well.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah. So you signed a pledge to not take any donations from police unions and you know, police-like unions when it comes to over-policing and police brutality. It often affects South Sacramento most, which is the area you're running in. How do you plan to address that as a city council member?
How do I plan to address
over-policing and police brutality?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. Thank you so much. I think a big part of it, you know, there's been a lot of conversation, quote unquote, about defunding, right? And as someone from you know, with a background in public health, I think it's incredibly important that our budget reflects our values. And I think when you talk about police brutality, a lot of that has to be in policy and implement in terms of practices, but I think it also comes to how the city is funding resources. And I think a big part of that is making sure that we reallocate resources to communities most in need. There's several things that I think the council can do immediately that I've talked about, which is one, you know, we have a police commission, but they're not taken seriously. And oftentimes they make recommendations and they sit on a shelf, right? And I think that if you are to, you know, talk about police brutality and citizen oversight, then it also means that you have to take your commissions who are appointees by the city council seriously when they make recommendations. So there are some actually low-hanging fruits that I think that can already be implemented, right? And then there's a structural piece, right? Also the structural piece that takes time to make changes, and a lot of that's actually tied to budget, right? And so, you know, I think for me, I think one reason why you know, me and 3 other women of color really started this pledge was because I think oftentimes, you know, police unions has had a lot of recognition in terms of institutional power. And it's really important for me because I've seen when reforms are happening or when you want to make changes, oftentimes there's resistance, right? And if you want to lead a conversation around reform, around reallocation of services, it's also important to maintain your independence. And so that was really important for me.
Thank you so much. So to just change direction just a little bit, what are your environmental priorities if you make it onto city council, and what do you think the city can do to combat the climate crisis?
Yeah, so first I just want to say, you know, I live in Meadowview. I live in South Sacramento. And I think, you know, you always hear like Sacramento is like the city of trees, right? And while the Sacramento is known as the city of trees, we also know that many parts of our communities lack a tree canopy, right? In lower income neighborhoods. You know, I've worked with the Tree Foundation to really be strategic around planting trees in our neighborhoods, in our schools as well. As someone on the Sacramento City School Board, I am incredibly passionate about urban ag and just, you know, the urban ag in our schools and making sure that we do that. I think that's a big part. I think, you know, the city, when you think about when the recession hit a couple years ago, I think the city had really cut back on a lot of resources for maintaining our parks, right? And I think we need to be able to up those level of services, right? To be able to protect and expand our urban green spaces. That's really important to me. And as a city councilwoman, you know, I would be working with my colleagues to make sure that we invest more in our parks and to make sure that they stay healthy, because we know that when you have healthy neighborhoods, when you have healthy parks, you know, you see more families at these parks, right? And that's really important. So, you know, making sure we have green infrastructure to make our city more livable is important to me. The other piece I would also share is, I think, really thinking about public transportation options and figuring out how we can expand and modernize it, because I think we really need to address the barriers of the current transportation system that we have, especially for many of our residents in South Sacramento. If you don't have a car, you can't get around, but we also know transportation is one of the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, right, and air pollution in the Sacramento region. And so, I'm a big, someone that would push for us to think about, increasing walking and bicycling and using public transit. But that also means we can try to push for these things as advocates and say it, but you got to make sure that you also help create the conditions for it, right? That our streets walkable. Like, we can talk about, we got to walk more, we got to bike more, but is it safe, right? And so it's also the infrastructure piece for me. So the transportation piece is really important for me. I think ensuring that when we talk about being the city of trees, and then the other piece is also, I think there is this effort really to reduce emissions, to really begin to transition to renewable energy, right? I know when I worked in Councilman McCarr's office, I was a big proponent of figuring out how we could really install like community charging station, right? If there are shared electric vehicles, and there's a few in some of the apartment complexes in District 8, and I was, a big supporter of that, and hoping that we could do more of that. And I really believe Sacramento is really well positioned to kind of lead on this, but you really just need young folks and progressive folks at the dais to push for these things. So some of these are some of the items that I want to focus on. And then at the last piece is really, I think we have a lot of vacant lots. And I think when I think about climate change, I always think about growing your food as well, right? And I'm super passionate about urban ag with our urban pathway. I think there are a lot of skills and talent in District 8 with our Black farmers, with our Hmong farmers, but we're not capitalizing on that, and there's a lot of conversation always around farm to fork movement. And I always say, we talk about farm to fork, but some of our families don't have fork. Like, we can do that work now. We could be the heart of that movement here. And I think that is intrinsically tied to everything that Sunrise Sacramento is doing too, because, when we talk about climate change, and when I think about educating the Hmong community or our communities of color who may see them as separate things, they're all interconnected in the ways that we live. And so those are some of my priorities around how we can address climate change and make communities more livable in Sacramento.
Thank you so much. And that answers much of the next question I'm going to ask. So we can focus on a couple different parts of it. I'm going to do a time check here. The next candidate's interview is at 2:40. So we have about 3 minutes. And
okay, wow, it's quick. Okay, yeah. This is super quick. Okay.
As you said, neighborhoods in South Sacramento face many environmental burdens compared to other areas in Sacramento, including higher pollution, less access to fresh food, inadequate public transportation, fewer trees to shade. You mentioned all of those things. So how do you plan to address some inadequacies like higher levels of linguistic isolation and higher levels of unemployment and asthma hospitalizations?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I'm just, I don't have the answer to everything, right? But what I think about, like, the communities, when we had the heat wave, when we had all these things happening, like even now, how are we as Sacramento even preparing for it, right? For communities who don't speak. So for example, the Hmong community, right? When information went out, like we didn't see anything in Hmong, right? And so making sure that we actually have a plan in place, right? When there are future heat waves, when things, and we know they're coming, right? And I think making sure that the city has the infrastructure to be able to communicate that with our communities on the ground. That's really important for me. I also know this work can't be done by one elected, right? And Councilwoman-elect Katie Valenzuela and I talk about this a lot, how, it's going to be so important for us to be able to organize inside and outside, right? You need elected leaders who are bold and courageous that are going to make those decisions, but you also got to know how to count, right? Like Katie and I could be fighting, but we also have to make sure that we get our votes in. And that also means partnering with amazing community organizations like Sunrise Sacramento to also keep the pressure on, right? Because I always say this, if I'm honored enough to be selected by the voters, I'm not going to City Hall alone. I'm going with all of y'all, right? Because this is a lifetime of work, and it's not going to happen overnight and over a month. It's going to take a movement, right? It's going to take a movement of young people, really reimagining what kind of world we want to live in, and the kind of world we want to leave for those we love, right? So.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we have probably about 30 seconds left. left. So if you want to give a kind of ending statement here, here's your opportunity.
Yeah, so again, just thank you so much for the opportunity to be in space virtually with all of you. I'm just really grateful to be here, actually. And I think, you know, win or lose, right? I'm not going anywhere. I was born and raised in South Sacramento. The work continues. But I really hope that, you know, I will earn the endorsement of Sunrise Sacramento and the voters so that the work can continue at City Hall. Again, we are in a really critical moment, just not in this pandemic. There's also, you know, racial injustice. We have, you know, climate change. There's so much at stake this November, and, you know, win or lose, I'm gonna be fighting alongside y'all. And so I just want to say thank you so much. Hella grateful for being here today, and good luck on just the endorsement process. You know, I know there's a lot of great candidates out there, but just really honored to be in space with all of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here, Mai. Again, that was Mai Vang, running for Sacramento City Council District 8. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And we are going to kick you out now because that's what our policy is during this.
All good. Stay safe, everyone.
Okay, so next up we have, bye Mai.
Bye.
Next up we have Tamika L'Ecluse, and I apologize if I butcher your name. I'm going to give you the opportunity to say it correctly next, who's running for the American River Flood Control District. You'll have from 2:40 until 2:55. That's the time period we're giving you. I'll give you time to give yourself a 3 to 4 minute intro, and then we have a bunch of questions we'd like to ask you.
Okay.
So, turn it over to you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Tamika L'Ecluse. I live here in Sacramento, so I'm happy to see some of my friends and colleagues and neighbors who are part of this movement. I'm running for the American River Flood Control Board, which I was appointed to last year. And part of my story in why I wanted to join the flood control board is because I remember living in these flood zones. I remember not being able to go to school because our streets were flooded in North Highlands. I remember not being able to go to school because our streets were flooded in South Natomas, which is a huge floodplain. And so I wanted to bring some of that to the flood board because I didn't want other kids to have those experiences. Flood control is really important. We know that we're overdue. We know that you know, that the 1,000-year flood is upon our doorsteps, and it is imperative that we are doing everything in our power at the community level to make sure that we are prepared, right? I remember filling sandbags, you know, for my friends who were living along rivers and along levees. So I wanted to bring my experience in my community, my experience as a child living in flood zones, to the flood board to really make some change. But when I got on, I realized that part of the conversation that I wasn't linking, because as a community person, you know, in Oak Park, I ran the neighborhood association. We advocated for you know, affordable housing in our communities, you know, not gentrifying us out of our community. And so housing, you know, I had housing over under that hat, and then community organizing under that hat. And then I had flood control kind of over here. But once I got on, I realized housing and flood control, those are conversations that need to be happening simultaneously. Most of the work and most of the conversations that we have at our board meetings are directed to housing, because we know that the folks who are living on the river, folks who are living along the river, folks who recreate along the river, everybody is affected by flood control, but the most affected people are the houseless folks. So that's what I really want to champion my next term. I want to make housing part of the conversation, like pro-housing, like let's build more, let's be better advocates. I want that to be a part of the flood control conversation moving forward. So that's why I'm here.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being here. Your connection seems to be a little bit wibbly. So if you'd like to turn up your video, we would still love to hear you clearly. We were able to hear everything, but just a.
Okay. I was just checking on my things. We've been having some internet issues, so.
Yeah, I know the
So
feeling.
you said video off?
Yeah, video off might make the connection a little more stable. Okay, so
All right.
yeah, we'll get into some questions here, and again, a reminder: we have about 10 minutes left. So you mentioned that you grew up in Sacramento and have experienced flooding here. So the first question we have is: Sacramento is more vulnerable to catastrophic flooding than any other major city in the United States, except for New Orleans. How do you plan to address making sure that residents, especially those in Black and Brown communities, are prepared for the risk of a major flood? And I think I'd like to include in there, because you're championing this, those who are unhomed.
Yes, thank you for that. So I am the only board member. First of all, I'm the first African-American board member. I'm the first Black woman board member, trustee to the flood control district. But I'm also the only person who lives in an high-risk, underserved area. I live in Del Paso Heights. I came from Oak Park prior. And so Del Paso Heights is a community that needs more outreach. It needs a community person who cares about them, lives here. I live here 2 blocks from Arcade Creek. Not only my voice on the board, but being connected with my neighbors, talking with them. Anytime I have the opportunity to tell people the importance of flood control, I take it, because it's so important. We're at such a vulnerable time, all of us. We can't afford more evictions. We can't afford more people losing their homes to anything at this point. We are in a critical phase that really will take all of us, and it'll take my community, it'll take the River Park community, it'll take Land Park community, it'll take all of us. But historically, we know that communities like mine have not been prioritized when it comes to flood control, when it comes to maintenance, when it comes to outreach, when it comes to true community engagement. And so that is what I'm committed to.
Great, thank you for addressing that. As you might know, Sacramento Sunrise, well, Sunrise in general, is very focused on the Green New Deal, which has a lot of different aspects. But how can we use investments in flood resilience as a way to create quality jobs and advance the Green New Deal, i.e. planting trees, ecological restoration, home retrofitting, that sort of thing?
Well, and yeah, and even just in the maintenance of levees, making sure that we are using equipment that's not adding, to the greenhouse emissions. We need to make sure that we are replacing plants that need to be removed with drought-tolerant native plants. We need to make sure, but I think additionally, our levee system is pretty expansive. There's such an opportunity to create more internships, more partnerships, more trainings in how to take care of this critical infrastructure. I think that part of our job on flood control is to foster that, is to prioritize that with every policy, is to keep making sure that we are asking, hey, is there a way that we can make sure that this is sustainable, not just, for now, but we gotta think long-term. So that's just kind of where I am.
Okay, great.
I don't know, flood control, like my husband works on houses. I like levies.
That's great. We definitely want someone who likes to work on levies. So I'm going to do another time check. We've got 5 minutes left for you, and I would like to give you around 30 seconds at the end so that you can kind of make a closing statement. So until then, I'll give you a couple more questions. Do you agree with using conservation easements to help protect more edges and banks of the river?
Conservation easements. I'm sorry, can you please explain? Can you please explain what you mean?
Yeah, Shay, did you write this question, and would you like to jump in to speak on this?
Yeah, I did write this question. So are you asking for like
I'm looking for some more information
about conservation easements?
I'm not familiar, I'm sorry.
Oh, so conservation easements are particularly like designating or zoning land, whether that means buying it back from the original owners or maybe just zoning current county land that's specific to conservation.
Oh my God, yes, absolutely. Oh. And so with conservation easements, essentially, and this is a problem I think that we've come up with quite a few times. Back a long time ago, when people were keeping paper records, some folks who had purchased, properties along the levees had really taken assumed ownership of the levee, and that is something that we are aware of, and we are trying to work with our community members as much as possible, because the practices that people think are great for themselves have been detrimental to our system, and to our ability, exactly, and to our ability to be able to continually inspect and repair and monitor our levees. There's folks, there's changes, people have made years ago, whether it's adding are those called docks, adding a dock from their house or from the levee, making it into their own garden with really invasive plants. And it's definitely something I support, and I will work with my board to continue to support, making sure that everything that we do is in the name of conservation and forward thinking, and making sure that everything that we are able to enjoy now, that our 7 generations beyond us can enjoy too.
Great. So I think this is going to be the last question before we give you that 30 seconds to wrap up. Not that past question, this next question. How will you work with and get feedback from partners like community organizations, local, state, and federal agencies?
Yes, so as you can tell, I'm a talker. And so anybody that will listen to my plan and jump in with me on how to move forward with prioritizing the houseless people on the levees, I talk to. And I am like, look, this is what we got to do. This is what we got to bring on. That is my passion. That is what I want to do. And so with that, I talk to anybody who is of influence, anybody who will take this idea that's not, it's not a wild idea to prioritize, housing people and truly make housing a right. We were visiting friends in Paris, and they said that they heard about our numbers, and they said that is unacceptable, like just unacceptable. And that's the kind of, sorry, I just hit my desk. That's the kind of advocacy we need. We need it to be unacceptable. So that means it's unacceptable to silo. It's unacceptable to leave folks out. It's unacceptable not to include community. It's unacceptable to be silent. And so that's where I want us to get, and I want us to work together. I do believe that this is something that we have to do across jurisdictions, across departments, across communities. I think this is something that is a priority. I know it's a priority for me. I think it's a priority for our housing advocates, and I hope that it can be more of a priority for my other elected officials at various levels, from our special districts to the state.
Great, and we only have about 20 seconds left, so if you want to give yourself a closing statement, this is the time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you, Sunrise Sacramento. In my heart, I think of you as the sunshine people. I really want to bring sunshine, to the Flood Board. I want that vibrance. I want that excitement there. I want everybody to know the importance and to be invested. I am the first Black woman, but I am not going to be the last. We need every community represented. We are fighting for by district elections. I am looking so forward to tackling and prioritizing our houseless folks on the river, and I hope to get your endorsement as well as your votes, because you're my folks.
Thank you so much for being here, Tamika. Really appreciate it. Again, Tamika, and can you say your last name for me?
L'Ecluse. You did a good job.
Okay, excellent. Tamika L'Ecluse, who's running for American River Flood Control District. And now we're going to take you off the call, because that's what we've been doing for all of the candidates. Thank you so much for being here.
Stay safe.
Okay, next up, we have Rob Kerth, who is the current incumbent for SMUD, the SMUD Board for Ward 5. Rob, you're going to have from 2:55, which we've now passed, so we'll give you a couple extra minutes, to 3:10. And first, you can give yourself a couple 3 to 4 minute intro, and then we have a bunch of questions we'd love to ask you.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Well, hey, thanks you guys so much for making time for me. I really appreciate it. And for being involved. It's so hard to get people to be involved, and really great to be here with you. So I'm proud to come before you today as the president of the SMUD Board of Directors, the most progressive utility in the country, the first electric utility to embrace the Green New Deal, and the first electric utility to dedicate itself to carbon neutrality by 2030, a full 15 years before California's goal. We're the #1 rated utility for customer service, the #1 rated utility for environmental programs, and the utility with the most diverse workforce in the electric industry. SMUD proves that public ownership works. At SMUD, we have some of the lowest rates, the cleanest and most reliable power around. And now, as good as that is, don't think for one moment that we've done that at the expense of any group. SMUD values labor and adopts project labor agreements on all of its large projects. We offer generous financial assistance to those who need it most, eliminating power cutoffs and late fees until we can put this virus down. We have an impeccable record for employee and public safety, and we haven't blacked out our customers like our neighboring PG&E has. Part of SMUD's mission to fight systemic racism and inequality. SMUD has created a number of programs to recruit into our workforce people from historically disadvantaged communities. All of our employees are required to attend an unconscious bias training, and our security officers have already completed it. We've launched several new programs to help our disadvantaged communities turn the corner. And we are doubling the size of our child care center and requiring child care in really all our new projects. I'm an engineer, a very lucky one, who won a scholarship to jump from Norte del Rio High School in what is now the Twin Rivers School District in North Sacramento to Stanford, where I earned a master's degree in mechanical engineering. So now SMUD has scholarships, internships, special events, in-classroom programs to help aspiring students get excited and get trained. So I think we're really good at SMUD, and we try to do everything the best we can, but there is much more to do. We must move from inclusion to belonging in our workforce. We must get to carbon neutrality by 2030. We must invest more in our disadvantaged communities, and we must keep the lights on with green power and low rates. We must explore new ways to serve, like SMUD providing internet service. And, you know, these are very hard things, each one of them, the things that will take all my skill from 18 years in public office. So I'm here to ask for your endorsement in this race so that we can get to know each other during the campaign and make these things happen. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you've got.
And thank you so much for being here.
Of course.
So the first question we have is, what did you personally do in your previous term or your previous terms to phase out the five fossil fuel plants that are still operating in Sacramento?
A couple of things. We've entered into a hydrogen program where we're currently going to use solar energy to create hydrogen and use that to displace the gas from the natural gas from the feed stream to the turbines. The goal here is eventually to replace the natural gas 100% with hydrogen. We've started battery storage programs to store the solar energy. We doubled the size of our wind farm, and we've contracted for, although it's not completed, it'll be completed in a few months, and almost doubling the size of our solar field at Rancho Seco. We're adding another 180 megawatts to that field down there. Eventually that'll be a 500 megawatt field. You know, there's so many things. Stop me when you're tired, but we've embarked on a battery program a car charging program where we'll be putting 600 car chargers throughout the region, on-street chargers, so that anybody can use them. We've come up with a significant subsidy and incentive program for the purchase of electric vehicles. We sponsored and really have seen through now the Mayor's Climate Change program to eliminate gas in buildings. And we've recruited several new subdivision developers to eliminate natural gas in their new housing developments, so we can get them to all electric.
I'll interrupt you there just so we can get to some more questions.
You know, it's an amazing organization. I go on too long. I'm sorry.
Quite all right. We do have you here to talk. So you mentioned using solar, and I know there's been a lot of controversy around the Solar Shares program with SMUD. How do you feel that conversation has gone, and do you think that SMUD is allowing enough rooftop solar to address the needs of the climate crisis?
Well, let me answer first what we've been doing about this and why we did it and what that program does. So first off, in our 2040 energy plan, SMUD is calling for 75,000 solar rooftops. Today we have 25,000. So we want to almost triple what we've got out there today. So we are absolutely planning on rooftop solar. That's very important to our plan. We can't make it without it. Some places, rooftop solar is difficult. In an existing neighborhood that has a complete tree canopy, sometimes on multi-story developments, things like that. And so we're completely committed to every building doing its part, but it may not be able to do it on the premises. And so to replace on-premises solar, we came up with neighborhood solar. Now, neighborhood solar is a lot cheaper. And so there's a tension there that the rooftop solar folks are kind of worried about it. But let me assure you, our intention is never to replace rooftop, because we need it. We need a lot more of it. But we need to have, you know, how do I say it? There's no silver bullet to climate change, but there's a lot of silver buckshot. Neighborhood solar is one of the BBs, and we need them all to get this done. And about the conversation, it was horrible. Everybody felt threatened and offended, and you know, that's a kind of a black eye on SMUD's part that we weren't able to conduct that better. We'll do better next time.
Thank you. So staying on solar, I don't want to linger too long on here because there are other questions here. And I'm going to give a time check. We have about 6 minutes. We're going to go a couple minutes over because we had to start late. Well, we're giving you the time. So SMUD just released a solar study, I think it was last week. And there was, again, some concern in that around whether or not it was taking in the full impact that solar can have on the climate crisis. Do you want to address the solar study at all?
You know, the study's still a draft. Just need to remind folks that the board votes last. And clearly the draft came out, it's got some holes in it that we got to fix. And so we'll come up with a number. There's this sense that rooftop needs to be the cheapest, and it doesn't. Because it's a diversity issue. It's a job creation issue. It's really a community, an individual empowerment issue. And so rooftop needs to be part of a solution regardless. Honestly, some people argue we reimburse people 5.5 cents for their solar today. The study says it's 7. I mean, the way I read it says we're underpaying for it already.
Great, thank you for answering that.
Sure.
So SMUD also just released a climate emergency declaration that has more ambitious goals than the current IRP. Would you briefly explain what the IRP is and how you in your new term are going to work to get the IRP in line with the climate emergency declaration?
So I'm an engineer, and I've learned over the years to always avoid the acronyms. So I call the IRP our 2040 energy plan. So it was started in 2015, adopted in 2018. We're about to start a new version of it. Since that time, I proposed and helped author with the climate advocate community this climate declaration. So I'm completely committed to getting us there by 2030. When we adopt the next 2040 energy plan, it's going to show us getting to carbon neutrality by 2030. So it's a big lumbering beast, the government, right? And so we got to make sure it's pointed the right way, and that takes time, but we'll get there.
So just to follow up on that, you do have confidence that you and the board can convince the staff to or direct the staff to get that goal done?
No, I like the word convince more, because it's always a partnership between the electeds and the government or the staff, and we have to be on the same page. Part of the reason why I brought forward the climate declaration when I did is I wanted it to be this indelible mark, this high bar that we set out in front of our new CEO. We're just completing now the process of hiring a new CEO. So when we brought them all in there, that was one of the questions. Here's our goal. Can we meet it? How are you going to help us meet it? And so we selected a candidate that is absolutely committed to getting us there.
Great. Okay, so
it's not going to be easy, right? It's going to be really hard. This is our moonshot, but we think we can do it. Moons do get reached.
Definitely. And thank you for passing that climate emergency declaration. So we have a couple more questions here, and I do want to give you time at the end to kind of give a small statement about why you'd like our endorsement. So I put this question forward. I noticed in your the questionnaire that you filled out before this candidate forum that several of the top donors to your campaign are construction companies. And right. I'm wondering if there is any sort of conflict of interest of being donated to by construction companies and then having some oversight over those construction projects or the allocation of them.
I don't think I received any money from our contractors at SMUD. Maybe I did. If I did, it wasn't much. Mostly it's people in the construction industry. They build homes, they build office buildings, things like that. One of my biggest donors are the people that are building the high density housing in Midtown. And so I've developed a relationship with those people over many years. They know what they get. That's somebody that's very clear, that returns their calls, that gets the job done. But at the same time, I'm able to get them to do things that they wouldn't otherwise do, like giving up gas in their developments. And so we have a relationship, we make it all work. And you know what you get with me, and that's somebody that's dedicated to climate dedicated to equality, dedicated to low rates.
Great. So you have been on the board a long time, and your opponent mentioned that as one of the reasons that she's running against you, just to change leadership. So what would you say is your biggest accomplishment over your term, and what do you think is the primary thing you need to work harder on?
Biggest accomplishment is the climate declaration. And that's the obvious, the tip of the iceberg of that. There's a whole bunch of things happen behind the scenes to make that even possible. And that's so reorienting the staff around the climate emergency and reorienting their thinking to the possibility of getting it done. Often at SMUD, we toil away in relative anonymity, and we send out a lot of invites that never get answered. But we still try very hard to do the right thing. So as a board member, and as a very experienced elected official, I know how to get stuff done in that environment and to be faithful to, the promises that I've made and the things that have to get done to benefit our community. I'm always available. My cell phone number is available to anyone who wants it. And I always encourage folks to chime in with their thoughts and their hopes so we can figure out how to get it done. Moving forward, SMUD has to be a bigger open book. Right now we're an open book that nobody much wants to read. And so we need to figure out how to make it much more accessible, what we do, how to avoid things like IRP and instead talk about climate action plans, the things that make sense to people in ways that make sense. So I can sense I'm about out of time. So should I go into my last minute here?
Well, why don't you use your last minute? You can kind of close up with your statement as well.
The board, me, the staff, we are absolutely committed to climate change and to eliminating the climate, our contribution to the climate emergency. But that's not enough. SMUD's a vanishingly small part of the problem. And so we have to set the standard for utilities across the country for how to get this done. My biggest concern, and that's where y'all come in, is that we're not able to convince the public to stay with us on this change. I mean, our plan right now is a $7 billion plan, and that comes, largely from ratepayers. And so if we lose their faith, if we lose their trust, if we lose their commitment to this huge endeavor that we're on, the fight takes years longer and we may never make it. And so that's why I need you guys. I need your energy. I need your help. I need your enthusiasm. I need you to be there with me to convince the public how important it is, how it's possible, and how together we can do it, and why we should be so proud of it that we can invest this money to prove to the world it can be done. There's no other utility can do that today. SMUD's the perfect size. We're in the right place. We got the right people. We got the right community. It's so there, we can grab that, but we can't do it alone. That's why I would just love to have you with me so we can spend the time building a relationship and get this done.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here, Rob. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Rob Kerth, who is the current incumbent and is running for SMUD Board, Ward 5. And now we're going to kick you off the call.
Bye, folks. Have a great day. And thanks again.
Okay, great. Next up, we have Gregg Fishman, who is running for the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors, District 3. I'd just like to note that Gregg is on the SMUD board right now. Just a fun fact. So welcome, Gregg. We're going to give you from now until around 3:30, just because we're starting a little bit late.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
So we'll give you 3 to 4 minutes to do an intro for yourself, and then we have a bunch of questions we'd like to ask you.
All right, sure. Thank you. First, thanks for this opportunity. Appreciate the chance to get to know you and have you get to know me a little bit better and what I stand for. I am a member of the SMUD board. I've been on the board now for about 6 years. I'm running for Sacramento County Supervisor in District 3, which is kind of the northeast side of Sacramento County. It includes Olive Arden Arcade, Fair Oaks, Carmichael, and up into Foothill Farms and Antelope a little bit too. So why am I running? County government is where the rubber meets the road in so many ways, including climate change and improving our environment, but also in terms of maintaining health and human services. Obviously, we're meeting by Zoom because we have this COVID issue that we're dealing with, and the county has not proven particularly effective at that. That's job one. We need to make sure that our residents are safe, that the dollars that are coming in to deal with COVID-19 are spent appropriately. I intend to do that as a member of the board. The environment is incredibly important to me. You know, as a member of the SMUD board, I'm really proud that we've declared a climate emergency, and we've asked our staff to look at accelerating what were already, frankly, some of the most aggressive utility goals in the country to reduce carbon output. So we're asking them to see if we can get to net zero by 2030, 10 years faster than we'd previously asked. So that's a huge challenge, but I think the SMUD staff is up for it, and the board is ready to lead in that direction. For Sacramento County, we don't even have a viable climate action plan. They started one. There's one that's kind of internal for county government operations that has some decent elements in it, but that was 8 years ago. It hasn't been updated since then. Many of those elements have been allowed to wane a little bit. And there is no external plan in terms of how are we going to manage carbon reduction for the region with land use, housing decisions, transportation options. The county has just fallen flat on that. So it would absolutely be one of my goals to reinvigorate that process within the first year of my term, and come back with, have staff come back with a viable climate action plan that moves the county forward, that collaborates with the city of Sacramento, with SMUD, with the Air Quality Management District, and with other cities in the county to make sure that we're doing everything we can to reduce our carbon output as a region. This has to be a regional effort, and there has to be collaboration. It's unconscionable, frankly, that there hasn't been. Housing and homelessness, clearly other big issues that I need to address as a member of the board. These go hand in glove, frankly, with some of the climate action goals. We have to come up with a housing plan that makes sense, that incentivizes infill, transit-oriented, all-electric development, and solar as much as appropriate. We have to deal with our homelessness issue in a way that is compassionate, but also makes sure that we are doing the right thing for the environment, because the homelessness issue is having a great impact on the river, on the American River Parkway, and frankly on air quality, because they're burning wood and other carbon-based fuels for cooking and to stay warm in the wintertime. We have to come up with some real solutions for homelessness if we want to meet those carbon goals as well. Those are kind of my basic tenets. I mean, there's so much more. Again, I've served on the SMUD board for 6 years. I worked for a different 6 years at the California State Association of Counties. So I think I have a really good understanding of what county government does. I worked side by side with some of the best county supervisors from other counties around the state. We kind of fostering and promoting some of their county programs to other counties. So, you know, let's not reinvent the wheel. Where there's a good idea, let's bring that back to Sacramento and put it in place here. I'm ready to do this. I think Sacramento County is ready for a change. We can break some of the gridlock that's existed on the board from a political standpoint, and I'm the guy to do that.
Excellent, thank you. So yeah, we have a lot of questions to ask you. I think it's because we see how important this seat is for all the things that you mentioned. You know, the county has a huge budget and affects a lot of what goes on in the county. So I think first I'll start off with a question here. You noted that you support the Green New Deal. However, it wasn't something you prioritize if and when there is a budget shortfall, which in your questionnaire you mentioned we're heading into due to COVID-19. And why is a green economy something you're willing to put off?
It's not that I'm willing to put it off, but I think it has to be part of a coherent plan to move us forward. And within that, I mean, we absolutely have to incorporate those ideals, those concepts into everything else we do. So I guess it's not that I want to put it off but it has to be part of everything else we do. So I don't see it as a separate thing and, oh, we're going to do a green economy. The green economy is part of everything else that we must do as we move forward. Does that make sense? I think, we absolutely need to incorporate those concepts and those ideals into land use and planning and housing starts. We absolutely have to incorporate those concepts into how we manage the homelessness issue. And again, because that's so interrelated with housing, we absolutely have to manage that, incorporate those ideals into establishing a climate action plan and moving that forward. And, at SMUD, I mean, we're fostering that green economy on a regular basis through our solar programs, through the incentives we offer for energy efficiency, for other ways to reduce your carbon output, electric vehicles. So I guess my answer is yes, let's do all those things, but as in almost as an organic, coherent part of what we do on a normal basis.
Great, thanks. And this is just a quick question. Will you have to leave the SMUD board if you get elected to this position?
It's a good question. I'm not sure if I would legally have to do it, but I would do it. I mean, there's really no way to manage both of those jobs effectively. Being on the SMUD board is not a full-time job. It's depending on the week and the issue and the schedule of things that we're doing, it might be anywhere from 10 hours a week on up to sometimes 20, but it's not a full-time job. Being a county supervisor certainly is, and I wouldn't attempt to do both.
Great. Okay, so we were just speaking of budgets. So the next question we have is, did you know that over 70% of the county budget goes to law enforcement and the carceral system? What changes would you make to prioritize people and our climate crisis if we're elected?
So I am. Let me say two things about that. First of all, we absolutely need a sheriff's department that is responsive and is efficient and is effective and that is there when we need it. We also need to make sure that our health and human services programs and roads and bridges are maintained, the rest of the county infrastructure. And so these are going to be competing priorities. I am all about, I guess, an ounce of prevention over a pound of cure. And to a great degree, the money that we spend preventing people and issues from becoming criminal activity, that's money well spent. And whether that's dealing more effectively with people who are mentally ill before it becomes a law enforcement issue. Incarcerating people who are mentally ill is absolutely the worst thing to do. It makes the problem worse. It does not help them. It does not help the issues that they may have caused that cause somebody to call 911 or call the sheriff's department. So we absolutely have to deal more effectively with that. We also have to deal more effectively with our homeless issues and get people into sustainable, stable housing that meets their needs, that meets our needs. Those are dollars that are well spent because it's less expensive to keep somebody in a home stable than it is to run them through a revolving door of the justice system. So these are not easy decisions to make, and they're not easy considerations. And but we absolutely have to start looking at it from that standpoint, an ounce of prevention over a pound of cure.
So just to put a point on that, because that sounds like we're in line with in some ways, are you willing to commit to moving some of the funds that are spent, especially on the sheriff, who takes up a huge amount of the budget and often overruns his part of the budget, and putting that into other prevention and community programs?
So here's my problem with when you ask me to commit to something. I mean, I certainly have a pretty good idea of, yes, I understand that the sheriff's budget takes up about 70% of the county budget. I understand that and that much of the rest of the money is earmarked, and the county funds come from a lot of different places, and it's not always easy to say, well, we're going to spend some of these dollars on something else. It's earmarked and you can't touch it. But we don't know how bad the problem is going to be next year. We know it's going to be tough, but we don't know how bad. So when you ask me to commit to something, I just can't do that. What I can do is tell you that I will absolutely be looking at that budget with a fine-tooth comb, making sure that the critical services that we need, law enforcement, health and human services, public health, all of those have enough funding to do the jobs that they need to do. That's the best I can do for you. I guess I would add that in addition to what we spend on the sheriff's department to do its job, what is I find entirely unconscionable is that we're also spending money on settlements for lawsuits related to poor care at the jail, in some cases sexual harassment issues and abuse of force. That has to end. Those are dollars that do nobody any good, and they take away from our ability to do the real job, the real work that the county has to do.
Great. Yeah, and I realize commitment can be a delicate term.
It's just, you know, we don't, in general, we don't know yet what we don't know about the budget. We don't know how much money we may get from another stimulus package. We don't know how deep the hole is going to be. And, you know, as much as I've been looking into this from the outside, I mean, I'm still not privy to everything that a sitting supervisor knows. Or the county staff knows. And so, you know, before I commit to anything, I mean, I have to have that information.
Right. So I'm just going to do a time check here. We have about 5 minutes left. We'll potentially, well, hopefully we'll get it within 5 minutes. And we'd like to give you, 30 seconds at the end at the very least to give yourself a kind of closing comment. So I'll try and get some more questions in here. So Sacramento County was the first county in California to adopt an environmental justice element into its general plan as required by SB 1000. Given that 2 of the 4 environmental justice communities identified are within District 3, North Highlands, Foothill Farms, and West Arden Arcade, how will you ensure that the county puts this planning into action?
So one thing that I'm really proud of, again, that SMUD has done, and I take no credit for this other than, you know, as a board member, you kind of create the atmosphere for these things to happen. SMUD's gone ahead and created what we call our Sustainable Communities Initiative. It's a way to look at all of the negative impacts around our community. And this is based on SMUD service territory, which is basically all of Sacramento County. Look at all of the negative impacts. So that's everything from the Cal Enviro screen, where SMUD's power plants are that are having an adverse impact on some communities, but also poverty, food deserts, lack of health care. There's a wide variety of other inputs that you can layer onto that. It also looks at the positive side. Where are the grants? Where are the state and federal dollars available to address these problems? And then how can we as a community bring all of that to bear on those communities that are most negatively impacted by everything, by those negative factors? And so that's something that SMUD has put together. As a member of the County Board of Supervisors, I would absolutely want to get the county staff more involved, and again, collaborating with SMUD, the Air Quality Management District, the city where it's feasible, and other agencies to say, how can we pool our resources? How can we make the best difference for those communities that need our help the most?
Excellent. So I got a question from the chat. As you might know, in the city, there is a campaign for the people's budget, which is, trying to change the way that we're spending the budget. We just talked about the fact that you don't know the full budget, and you're interested in changes there. Are you supportive of participatory budgeting? So groups coming together to give proposals on how the budget should be changed.
Absolutely. And we've seen the need for that just in the last couple of weeks when the county was talking about how to allocate the CARES Act funding. And, they $181 million from the federal government. How should that be allocated? The initial process was a black box, no public input, and the result, frankly, was a travesty. And it was an internal black box too. That's the real problem. They allocated the money into this bucket of salaries. That's one issue, but okay, let's say they did that. Now there's a commensurate amount of money that is available in the general fund. So what they did really was say, here's restricted money. We're going to use it in a manner that is okay by the restrictions. Now we have a commensurate amount of unrestricted money that we can work with. What got lost in that is the county health department didn't get the money they needed for the basic services that the federal dollars were intended for, which is testing for COVID-19, contact tracing, PPEs, public outreach in languages and culturally sensitive ways, and food service. For people, for the food bank, and people who rely on those services. So nowhere did that, where was that connection not made, that the county health department didn't know that there was this other pot of money that they could have gone to, and that allowed for 7 weeks those critical services to go unfunded. It's unconscionable. Don Natoli is the nicest man you will ever meet. I've known him for 20 years. I have never seen him angry. He was livid at that meeting, as well he should have been, that this connection was not made. So that absolutely has to happen. That could have happened if there had been more public input and if there had been a more transparent process, and I'm absolutely committed to that.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here. I'll give you about 20 seconds to kind of close yourself out.
Sure. Look, there's no such thing as a perfect candidate, and I may not be your perfect candidate, but I am the best guy to do this job, to push your agenda forward in a way that makes sense for Sacramento County. I've got the track record that proves that at SMUD, and actually before my service on the SMUD board, I mean, I've volunteered to plant trees in Sacramento County for 20 years. We planted over 2,000 trees. I volunteer in the community in other ways. I've promoted clean energy in various jobs before I got on the SMUD board in a number of different ways. So this is part of who I am, part of my DNA. I want to take this process forward into Sacramento County.
Well, thank you so much for being here. That was Gregg Fishman, who's running for the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors, District 3. And
Thank you.
Now we're going to kick you out.
Okay, I'm gone.
Okay, so I believe at this point I am handing it over to Logan. Are we staying in the same call, Logan?
We are, but we are gonna stop recording. Moise, if you want to do that, and stop streaming on Facebook. So if you're watching us live, this is goodbye as we transition to talking internally.